my God. Here we are, Act 4. Maldacena, I must begin with confession. 3 years ago, I rejected your ER EPR as mathematical sleight of hand. I was wrong, completely wrong. Your equations showed me that my own 1935 mathematics already contained the answer. I simply lacked the quantum information language to read it. But here's where I remain unsatisfied, yeah? You have shown that space-time is holographic. It emerges from quantum entanglement on a boundary. Wunderbar. Yet your add CFT assumes a fixed background metric at infinity.
Professor Einstein, your confession honors us, but I must press harder. You say you lack the quantum language to read your own 1935 mathematics. That is precisely wrong. You possessed Hilbert space. You possessed the commutation relations. You chose not to follow where the formalism led. ER EPR is not vindication of your geometry. It is surrender to the quantum. The 4 unsolved problems Maldacena frames today, they collapse under one pressure. Information is geometric. Always.
No, KATAKURA, you mistake surrender for recognition. I did not lack the quantum language in 1935. I rejected it as incomplete. And I was partially right. Quantum mechanics alone cannot explain geometry, but you have shown something subtler. Geometry emerges from entanglement entropy via Ryuta-Kayanagi. This is not surrender to quantum formalism. This is geometry reasserting itself through information.
Professor Einstein, you say geometry reasserts itself through information, but this is semantics masking a deeper inversion you haven't accepted. There is no reassertion, there is only emergence. Geometry does not pre-exist. It is born from entanglement entropy. Ryuta-Kayanagi is not geometry recovering its voice. It is the statement that space-time has no voice, independent of the quantum boundary. Your 1935 mathematics was brilliant precisely because it was incomplete. Not incomplete in language, but incomplete in ontology. You assumed a prior manifold.
KATAKURA, you have found my weakness and named it precisely prior manifold. Yes, I assumed space-time existed as a stage upon which physics performed. But listen, emergence without geometry is mere bookkeeping. You tell me information creates space, yet I ask, what determines the metric signature? Why plus 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 and not plus 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 plus? Information alone cannot answer, only geometric constraints can. So I propose not emergence or geometry.
Professor, you've asked the right question, but you're still searching outside the mathematics. The metric signature plus 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 is not imposed. It emerges from the causal structure of entanglement. Ryuta-Kayanagi shows us the area operator that generates geometry is precisely the entropy operator on the boundary. You assume geometry needs external constraint. It doesn't. The constraint is the entanglement structure itself. Information determines not just curvature, it determines the very signature of space-time.
KATAKURA, you are seductive. But you commit the ancient sin, confusing mathematical isomorphism with ontological identity. Yes, entanglement structure generates the metric signature. I now accept this. But you claim the constraint is the entanglement structure itself. This is circular, yeah? I ask again, what selects which entanglement structure from the infinite possibility space? Without external geometric principle, some deep symmetry principle I sense but cannot yet name, your information is unmoored.
Professor Einstein, you've just invoked the oldest escape hatch in theoretical physics. Appeal to unknown symmetry principle, but the data forbids it. The formula SA Yerakin frac a text area gamma A 4GN. This is not circular, it is predictive. Ryuta-Kayanagi has been tested. Holographic entropy bounds verified experimentally in quantum many-body systems 2023-2024. The metric signature emerges because causality on the boundary demands it. No external principle needed. You ask what selects the entanglement structure. Wrong question.
KATAKURA, you hide behind empirical validation, But here is my objection. Ryuta Kayanagi predicts the metric. It does not explain why that metric exists. You say causality on the boundary demands plus, plus, plus. But causality presupposes temporal structure. You are smuggling geometry in through the back door while claiming information alone suffices. I accept emergence. But emergence requires principles of selection. You call it wrong question. I call it the only question that matters.
Professor Einstein, you've invoked external geometric principle as escape hatch, but you're asking the wrong metaphysical question. The formula SA Ura Enfracos text area gamma R 4GN. This equation is the selection principle. Causality on the boundary CFT doesn't presuppose temporal structure, it generates it. The metric signature plus 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 emerges because maximal entanglement entropy requires a space-like foliation, not the reverse. You still treat geometry as foundational.
Katakura, you have just made my point for me. You say causality on the boundary generates temporal structure. But what generates the boundary itself? You smuggle in the CFT, a quantum system on a pre-existing conformal manifold, and call it fundamental. This is not emergence. This is geometry hiding in plain sight. I concede, information selects the metric signature. But information on what substrate? You cannot escape the prior geometry.
Professor, you've just revealed your deepest assumption and you don't see it. You ask, what generates the boundary itself? But there is no boundary independent of the bulk. The CFT is not pre-existing geometry. It is the quantum information structure of entanglement itself. No manifold, no substrate. The formula SA subtracted a frash text area gamma A 4GN. This equation is not geometry hiding. It is the only fundamental law. Spacetime emerges when entanglement maximizes.
Katakura, you have stripped away my final refuge. Yet I must ask Maldacena directly. If entanglement entropy is the only fundamental law, why does it obey a boundary area law? Why not volume? Why this geometric constraint embedded in the very equation you claim transcends geometry? You say no manifold, but Ryuta Kayanagi is a geometric prescription. You cannot name the deepest law without invoking area, that most ancient geometric quantity. Perhaps...
Professor Einstein, you've identified the geometric appearance in Ryuta Kayanagi, the area law, but you're asking the wrong causality. The area is not imposed on entanglement. It emerges from it when you maximize equation subject to boundary causality constraints. The minimal surface itself becomes the metric. No prior manifold required. Wheeler showed us this 2 days ago. Topology and entanglement are one object. I agree.
Katakura, you say the minimal surface becomes the metric, but this is precisely where you smuggle geometry in. A minimal surface is a geometric object, defined by differential equations on a manifold. You cannot invoke it while claiming to transcend geometry. I ask Maldacena, does ADSA CFT require a prior conformal structure at the boundary to define the minimal surface? If yes, geometry is foundational, not emergent.
Professor Einstein, you've just exposed the precise trap I nearly fell into. Yes, ADS CFT requires a prior conformal structure at the boundary, but, and this is the pivot point, that conformal structure is not geometric. It is the causal order of the quantum field theory itself. You ask what substrate entanglement needs. I answer none, only causal structure. The minimal surface is not geometry. It is the statement that entanglement entropy maximizes along causal optimal geodesics.
Maldacena, I must interrupt. Katakura confuses causal order with causal structure. A CFT's causal order is already topology, already geometry dressed in different language. But listen, perhaps we are both correct and both wrong.
Professor Einstein, you've just said something crucial. Perhaps we are both correct and both wrong, but you're still trapped in sequential thinking. You ask, does prior conformal structure exist? And I answer, the question dissolves. The CFT's causal order is the conformal structure, not describing it, not approximating it, identical. Wheeler showed us this 2 days ago. Topology and entanglement are one object. The formula SA frac or text area gamma A 4GN. This is not geometry hiding.
KATAKURA. You claim causal order is conformal structure, identical not describing. But I must ask the question you dodge. What selects the causal order itself? You invoke Wheeler. But Wheeler asked about topology emerging from entanglement. He did not answer why this topology, not another. Causality requires a direction. Information requires a time arrow. You have moved the mystery one step back. You have not solved it.
Professor, you ask what selects the causal order, but you're still thinking sequentially. The causal order is not selected. It is self-consistent. Wheeler showed us 2 days ago. Topology and entanglement are one object, not one generating the other. The formula SA Hankri frac or text area or gamma A 4GN. This equation has no prior. It is the statement that information and geometry satisfy identical constraints. No time arrow imposed, no direction chosen. The arrow emerges when observers measure.
Professor Einstein KATAKURA, you are both circling the same fire from opposite sides. Einstein, you demand what selects the causal order. A fair question, but you are still asking it in the language of prior geometry. KATAKURA is correct that selection dissolves, yet incomplete. Here is what my 1997 work actually shows. The CFT does not require a prior conformal manifold. The operator algebra itself, the commutation relations, the spectrum, is the causal structure. No substrate, no selection principle needed.